Okay guys, so I just wanted to make this video just to explain the structure of our classes and why it works and the reasons as to why we structured a class this way. So when we first started our tutoring about 3 years ago, before I started, I spent about a month, 2 months just researching about how memory works and how student learning works and that sort of thing. So one of the best things that I came across was this graph called the memory retention graph. So it's called memory retention graph, information retention graph. It's got many names, but basically the concept is it talks about how much content you would remember after going to a class. So I'm a student as well, and I've recently graduated high school, and I know that most of you guys would relate to this, and most of your parents would relate to this as well because they used to be students when they were young as well. And the thing that we all relate to is that we would go to a class, let's just say at 12 o'clock today, and when the teacher explains something, we fully understand it. We understand all the concepts, we remember everything, we take notes and everything. So at the class, when we finish the class, our understanding of the concept is pretty much at 100%. But as soon as we get home, we hardly remember any of the things that we remembered, that we learned. And then when we go through our notes, we start to wonder, oh my gosh, did we learn any of this stuff? So that's what happens. So when you learn something, I think the data suggests within 12 hours, you forget about 70% of the content, right? You hardly remember any of it. Now, these numbers, I'm not fully sure. I'll have to go back and read it. It's just for illustration purposes. So what you should do is, well, what the research says is that if you never revise that concept again, within like 24 hours, you pretty much forgot most of it, but you would have some sort of understanding of some of them, some of the overarching ideas, but you'd forget most of the minor details. But what the research found was that if you were to revise the concept several times, the amount of content that you retain or remember spikes significantly, and the drop later on is also very slow and minor. So in here, you can just see within 12 hours. So if I were to put down 12 hours, the drop is huge. But once you revise it, let's just say you go home that day, and then you go home and you go through your notes and you make better notes and transfer to your diary. What happens then is that the drop is much less significant, and you remember much more than you remembered, than what you had remembered if you had never revised. So if you had two students here, one student who never revised or made any notes, they would all remember about 30% of content, while the student who just revised just once would already remember 50% of the content. Now, imagine if you revise it a second time. So let's just say after a week, you want to transfer all your notes to your laptop, or you want to do some questions just to make sure that you fully understand, or you do a quiz. Your memory spikes up to, your content and understanding spikes up to 100%, but then it slowly drops even a bit more weekly. So now you would understand about 75% of the content. And the best thing about this is that if you revise it for a third time, let's just say just before your exam, you revise it one more time, your memory retention gets up to 90%. So this is the difference between a student who revises 0 times and a student who revises 3 times in a row. So how does this relate to you guys and the way we structure our classes? So we all know that most of us are not as productive as we like to be. For example, every year on January 1st, we all make resolutions saying, oh, this year I'll eat healthy, or this year I'll exercise, this year I'll save money, this year I'll do this, that, I'll study more, I'll read more books. But statistics says that by the 1st of February, most people who made a New Year's resolution would not live up to it or continue with it. And that's just what the majority of people are like. Most of us find it really hard to adopt new things and be the perfect person that we would like to be. So to make life easier for you guys, we've designed the class in a way that we can knock out one of this revision concepts. So that way you only have to revise twice to get up to here. So the way it works is like this. When you revise the concepts at home, you already do this first learning part, right? By forcing yourself to figure it out, your brain is switched from just like listening mode to learning mode, right? And that's one thing you need to understand. It's a very big difference between, let me just move this down here, between active learning and passive learning. Passive learning. So, excuse me, I think LERNING, sorry, ignore that. So active learning is when students, ask questions, they do quizzes, they ask, they're fully immersed in the content, they challenge the content and try to break it down. Passive learning is when you sit there and just listen and that's it. Active learning, your memory goes up so much more and your understanding goes up so much more than passive learning. So when you try to figure out the questions without any parental help or without us telling you how to do it, your brain tries to figure out concepts and questions and it becomes a challenge to you, and therefore you're much more likely to understand how it works out. So that way you've already done your first learning, learning task. By the time you come to the class next week, you would have forgotten most of it. And that's what the benefit of that is. When we go through it in class, we spike it back up to 100%. So that's your first revision done already without you having to do any sort of self, using your willpower. We've just programmed the course in a way so that you don't have to revise by yourself. Once you've done that, the learning curve goes down again. But most students do the most basic things, such as when you go home, you would take down your notes and transfer your notes. Or even in class, when you take down notes, you've already done your second revision. So by just doing the basics of just coming to class, you've already completed 2 revisions and also this learning curve. Now imagine if you guys just revise a week later or even a month later about the concepts, you've already revised it a 3rd time. So you've already done 3 revisions by just doing the most basics of things. In the other scenario, if we programmed it a different way, you would have to do 1, 2, 3 revisions using your own self-determination and willpower. But in the way we programmed it, it makes it easy for you guys to do these 3 revisions. Now, imagine if you're a very good student and you revise it one more time in between, pretty much your memory retention would be 100%. So that's why, even though our classes may look like we're only going through the homework questions, it's designed so that you guys have your maximum learning potential. All right, hope that helps you guys understand why the classes are organized in a certain way, and hope that helps. One last key point that I want to touch on that I just remembered now is why are our questions so hard and why we don't help you out at the beginning. And it all has to do with the psychology of the brain. And to give you an example of how this works, it's kind of like this. Imagine, for example, from my own perspective, from my own life experience. So this one time I went to dinner with some of my friends. It was a very formal dinner. It was part of her school event. And I didn't really know how to use cutlery, fork and knife and that sort of thing. I had it in the wrong hands. And it was very embarrassing because I didn't really understand it. And I was so formal, and it was just a very embarrassing moment for me. But once I got home, I realized that I need to learn the skill so that I need to, in order to, because it's a very practical skill that you need to have in terms of basic table manners. So once I got home, I learned it, and now I'm very good at using it. Another example would be when we learn to cycle. Everyone knows that when you learn to cycle, you need to fall and hurt yourself several times before you become a master of cycling, right? If you always have stabilizing wheels, you never learn to cycle. And that's the same concept with learning. Students are more likely to learn more of a concept if they get the questions wrong than if they get the question right. And this is because, let's just say you do a question. Let's just say in school, you had to do a basic question like, a half plus a quarter, right? And you get this question incorrectly and you write down 1/6 and you get this wrong, right? You would more like, because you're embarrassed of getting this question wrong. And if I was as a teacher, gently explain to you how to do this question, you're more likely to understand the concept of adding fractions with different denominators than if you were to get this question right by pure chance. Let's just say by pure chance you got this question right and you said the answer was 3/4. You like, because you got this question right, you will never revise it again. And that's why when we give the questions without any help, we know that you're going to get a lot of questions wrong. That is done on purpose. If you get about 50% correct in your homework booklets, it's very unlikely that you do that. And it's kind of like shocking to us because we've designed it so that you get a lot of the questions wrong. Because when you get the questions wrong, you're more likely to ask us questions. You're like, hey, Melvin, how do I do this question? Can you explain to me? And therefore, you're like more likely to take better notes and that sort of thing. All right. So hope that helps. And the big takeaways I want you guys to learn from this is about active and passive learning. It's all about the students who do really well are the ones who ask questions, right? The more questions you ask me and the better notes you take, the more likely you're going to learn a lot of the content, right? It doesn't matter if you're getting really bad scores right now. The students, from my past experience, the students who do really well in the GATE exam, and also just in generally in life and also just mini exams, is the students who actually want to learn and ask questions and that sort of thing. All right. So hope this is a wonderful, useful video, and I'm looking forward to see you guys soon.